Hey everyone, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Josh Neighbors here, joined by Chris Level, who is fresh off the plane from Houston, Texas, back in Lubbock, ready to talk some Red Raider football. Texas Tech gets the win last night. They go 8-5 on the year. We're going to break down the season that was and some expectations that sound like they will be coming for next season that's coming up next.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Chris Level from Red Raider Sports, the sideline man for Red Raider football, color commentator for the Texas Tech Red Raiders, and also one of the hosts of Locked On Red Raiders. Chris, what a night. This is going to run on Friday for us, so I guess 2 nights ago now, but what a night for Texas Tech. Just absolutely taking it to Ole Miss and finishing the year at 8-5. You and I talked before the season. I was kind of 5-7, 6-6 range. You were more 6-6, 7-5, and even 8-win range. And you nailed it. You had a great feel for this team all year, and I thought they were good all year, but they really stepped up to the plate. I felt like following that Baylor game, and last night was a culmination of all that. They were the more motivated team. They were the more their team that was just better, I thought, in all the phases, forcing turnovers, making plays on both sides of the ball, and it just felt like they had the juice of Joey McGuire. And even the crowd, the crowd was tremendous last night, and it feels like momentum is definitely on Texas Tech's side as we're about to turn the calendar to 2023.
Yeah, Josh, I think that's all very well said, because I think even before the year, if you tell me that you're going to win 8 games and you're going to be one of these teams that really just improves all year long and you're going to finish it off really hot, but you're going to do it with 3 different starting quarterbacks, I'm not sure if I believe you, because that's the part of this season that, if people saw the Texas Bowl MVP and Tyler Shough, what he's capable of, and what if you would have gotten 13 games of that, and he would have been one of those guys that would have been able to play the majority of the games. But Joey's, the Texas Tech's in a good place right now. I think that because Joey's recruiting well, Joey's motivating well, Joey has excited people, Joey's as genuine as anybody you'll ever be around. People love him for it. And, Texas Tech gives him a new contract. Yeah, it's just interesting because both coaches in this Texas Bowl, they essentially both have new contracts. One of them comes into the game with a 3-game winning streak, and the fan base is just fired up. The other one has lost, 4 of their last 5 and now 5 of their last 6 after that game. And one makes twice as much as the other, basically. And yet, if you talk to the fan bases, you wouldn't.
Not all 8-5s are created equally, right? That's kind of how it.
You're exactly right. But this is a starved fan base that is very appreciative of the energy that has been injected into their football program, and I think Texas Tech is in great hands right now going forward.
Yeah, I think it's funny, as we're still kind of moving past the death of Mike Leach, and I think when we look back at that and just think about like everything they accomplished, it was this team needs to be accomplishing, what Mike Leach did. Like he did every single year, right? He was every single year. They were kind of in this range right now. And Joey McGuire did that in year number 1, once again, with the carousel of quarterbacks. And also their little version, their different version, I guess you could say, of the air raid too. I think that's got to be mentioned as part of this, but this does feel, you kind of go different ways. Do you need a guy who's from Texas to win at Texas Tech? Is there more than one way to skin a cat, right? Because Mike Leach isn't this, born and bred Texas guy, right? But there are different ways to do this. And McGuire's way of doing it, at least in year 1, it's worked. And against the elite competition, sometimes it didn't always go great, but it's still his first year. And he hasn't built anything yet. He hasn't gotten his players in yet. And he had to re-recruit a lot of this roster. These guys came back, bought in, and they accomplished a lot, I thought, this season. And so I think it's, thinking about Mike Leach this year, because it's possible not to, considering he just passed away. Like, it's cool to see it done a different way, but still a little bit of his fingerprints with some of the air raid stuff that they do this year.
Yeah, Josh, I appreciate you mentioning Mike. I had a great relationship with Mike
Right.
when he was here years and years ago, and then that shook everybody up. But man, I will say that I really appreciated Joey's hit the tone of how he handles so many different situations, because college coaches, man, they're CEOs of small corporations, right? And it's all about management and delegation and just being on all the time. There's so many things that come with it, and I just thought Joey's handling of the Mike Leach stuff, as tricky as it was at Tech, was perfect because at the time that it happened, during the bowl game with the first play and the delay of game, just the tip of the cap, and then the things that he said after the game, because people at Tech loved Mike and loved everything that he was about, and he gave Tech an identity. Mike did, and it wasn't just the X's and O's and the air raid, but that was your identity. When you saw that double T, it's like, I know we're throwing for 500 yards. I know we're never out of a game. I know we're going to be relevant. We're going to a bowl game. The end. This is what you did around here for the better part of a decade. And I think Joey has now, because what I hear you saying is Joey's giving this program an identity now. They play hard. They go for it on fourth down a lot. They're going to be aggressive, and they're not going to be the most talented team in a lot of cases, but culture still wins in college football. And I think what Joey's been able to do is bring kids together, get them to buy in, and then just play really hard. Guess what? It worked, and they improved as the year went along. And I mean, truth be told, there's probably kids on this team that they would prefer, or that the staff knows, okay, these guys probably aren't going to play. They can't really help us. That they would love for, every coach has got some of those guys on the roster that they would prefer. Right. Okay, it'd be better if you went to go play somewhere else where we could kind of upgrade the roster. You know how that game is played, and yet nobody really has left, really, for the most part, because they love the way they're treated. They love being a part of this deal, and so that's worth mentioning as well.
Yeah, and it's funny. The one thing, like, you'll never have to worry about with McGuire. Now, it's the opposite side of it. But like he nailed the coordinator hires as far as it looks so far. And the good news is, after 1 year, they're going to get to retain those guys. Now, we're not out of the woods yet, right? We know how things change. We still have to deal with the NFL coaching cycle too, so we never know how stuff gets shaken up with that. But it feels like we're going to be in the clear with Zach Hitley and Tim DeRuyter. And I will say this: like, Texas Tech defense this year. They'll give it up, but pretty good in the red zone, right? Like, that's kind of the calling card. They got the kind of red zone stops that they needed to get in this season. I thought they played a really good game last night, and we'll talk some offense second, but that group, that's the swing group ultimately for Tech, in my opinion. That is the group that will decide whether you and I are talking about them going to Arlington next year and probably the next year after that. And I think it's pretty clear that they are trending in the right direction. They did not feel like they were hopeless. It felt like that team could bow up and make plays whenever they needed to. And also, I think playing a team kind of like Lane Kiffin's group helps you, because if that team's going for it on fourth down and you like your guys to get crucial, pivotal stops, it kind of plays into where they want to be in a certain way.
Well, for you to play Ole Miss, one of the top rushing offenses in the country, because those two backs they have are freaks.
Yeah,
I mean, Zach Evans and the Judkins.
We saw what Zach Evans did to them last year, right? I mean, he carved up Tech last year.
Absolutely, those guys are just they're fast, they're freaks. The scheme highlights them. For Tim DeRuyter to be able to put that together without your best player in Tyree Wilson, one of your best. Without one of your best run support safeties who did enter the portal, and Reggie Pearson's going to go to Oklahoma. You had a few other, hiccups with some backups that entered the portal and things like that. And then you roll out, I don't know, there's about 4 to 5 players that I could tell you their names that they haven't probably played at all this season. And for that defensive line to do what they did for the most of that game against those two running backs in that scheme, it says a lot about the guy that Tim is and just how hard those kids play. And the scary thing is for the rest of the Big 12 is that entire defensive line that was on display against Ole Miss, they all come back, every single one of them. And, you're going to have to replace some linebackers, but most of your secondary returns. And so you're right. That set the tone, the physicality, because Ole Miss was trying to bully you and punk you, and they kept trying to do it. And it not on this night. I mean, it just wasn't going to happen. And they you know, and you look at the stats, and Ole Miss got some yards, and the longer the game went, you know, because it was funny. I was sitting there right by Joey at the end of the game when Loic Fungi, he picks off the onside kick, and he's running it back for a touchdown, and he turns around and looks at Zach Kitley, and he says, "I wish he'd have gone down," and because they didn't want to have to play defense anymore, because they and Zach says to him something to the effect of, "Just enjoy it, man. Just try to enjoy it. I know that, you know," but it was just funny because they didn't want to have to keep sending their guys out there and
he couldn't turn that coach brain off, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And they had a good laugh at the very end of the game, but yeah, really, really good defensive performance. And again, the bulk of that group does come back next year.
And so the next guy we talk about is Tyler Shough.
Yeah.
Performance was fantastic. This offense puts a lot on the quarterback. I actually think it's one of the reasons why Bailey Zappe looked pretty good this year when he was playing in New England, is like they put a lot of responsibility on the quarterback. I mean, and for Shough too, as much as he ran the ball, and some of it's calling his own number, but like, you know, there's a lot of opportunities to run the football. And I want to get to whether or not that's the best thing in the world, but he was fantastic last night. And I always think about last year, the folks at Bet Online before the 2021 season started had Shough as a tie for the 5th best odds to be the number 1 pick. Now, a long shot, but that means that there is some value because the guy has the physical tools, he's got the arm strength, he's got some mobility, and it was all on display last night. And he says, and he's coming back. Massive. Now, obviously the question remains, like, can he stay healthy? But that's just huge to get a guy on the podium after winning a bowl game MVP on the significant first season for a coach, all this momentum to say, I want to come back and be part of this group. And I believe we're up to 14 starters returning now. Is that what they're at?
Well, yeah, they're almost their entire offense comes back. Right. I mean, everybody, in fact, everybody but one offensive lineman and Sir Roderick Thompson all come back or can come back. And then defensively, you're going to have to replace some linebackers and a few pieces in the secondary. And then obviously a guy like Tyree Wilson, but
yeah, you don't replace him. You just try to find a way to make up for it. But
you do not. But yeah, as far as Tyler goes, I don't want to talk in absolutes. I'm going to go off of what he said. I still think there maybe is a small conversation he will have and considering the NFL, because there's rumors about a combine invite already. I mean, he's a legit NFL prospect. I think that when he first transferred to Tech, I think people were like, whoa, really? I don't know if but no, he's a legit NFL prospect because here's why. He's the measurables, check that box. He's 6'3", 220. He's one of the smartest guys you'll ever be around. So when he gets up on the board, if he wants to talk football with any NFL guy, he will ace every test that they want to give him. And I think what people are seeing now is he's really a two-way guy in that he can use his legs. It's pretty sneaky. And I think he's been somewhat frustrated at how surprised people are about how successful he has been by running the ball. But the problem is that he got dinged up twice doing that, and that's what knocked him out. And so it kind of, there's some give and take there.
Right.
But we'll go off of his word, and then he is going to come back because, and again, I just say, what would it have looked like if he plays all year? I think you probably win more than 8 games. Okay. I just think that he's that good. And I think he was a big reason why you won the last 4, because here's the thing, Josh, they're not very good on offense. And what I mean by that is, their offensive line is not very good.
They've been pushed around at times this year.
There's not a lot of speed at all. I mean, and I credit Zach Kitley for squeezing water out of a rock at times, having to reinvent yourself as the weeks would go along based on who is your quarterback, because you don't have receivers that get behind the defense. You can't really lean on your run game because you're not as great up front. You can't just drop back the whole time because your offensive line against the defensive lines in the Big 12 couldn't hold up and pass protect. So you're just kind of mixing and mashing and putting together some things that the quarterbacks are comfortable with. And that's why there's been so much QB run game, because it was the one thing that they felt like they had to do against Ole Miss, because Ole Miss's scheme dictates that they're going to drop 8 in coverage a lot. They're playing cover 3. There were things to be had, and they tried to major in it. And Tyler was the one that was like, let's do it. I mean, and he got hit a few times. I thought there was more targeting penalties that should have been called that weren't, or were reviewed, however we want to phrase that. And I thought, oh, this may not end well. But he was tough. And, I mean, I thought if anybody deserved a moment on a podium with an MVP trophy for all that he'd been through, it was Tyler Shough. And he deserved his moment. And if he's back, look out.
Yeah, the NFL conversation is interesting because there is I want to see, if I'm an NFL personnel guy, I want to see him play a full season. Like that's the knock on him. Because I think when we watch him play, it's like I think we know if you put more tape on film, how it ends up, and it probably ends up looking pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and here the weird thing about the quarterbacks of the draft is there's a lot of quarterbacks that are electing to come back to school, and so it like the tweener types. So it is actually.
Why would I fight for a roster spot when I can play and make some money? And that's the good side of NIL. I mean, it's what's going to make college football, I think, a better product moving forward. Like, why would I go fight for a roster spot when I can play the game I love, get paid some money to do it? But for him, he's not Sam Hart. Like, he's a much better prospect than Sam Hartman is. I've watched a ton of him. He's a better NFL prospect than Sam Hartman is. Like, just physically, just with what he can do. The thing is it's the amount he's played. And I do want to ask you about this. I've got some concerns about how much the quarterbacks have to run. And can they do, like, how much of that this offseason can they fix to where it's not all on the quarterback? Because that's the big challenge, I think, for them offensively this offseason. As many points as they put up, they've got to fix that because it was a revolving door, and you can't live like that. They could live like that this year because that quarterback room was stacked. But Donovan Smith's gone. How does Behren Morton feel? And all that stuff.
Yeah, they will always have a component of QB run game in here. I just think that's the Big 12. That's college football. But yeah. I think last night was a bit of an exception.
22 carries, right?
Yeah, because of the scheme and kind of what you were doing and all that. I think the amount of red zone opportunities you had, and they were more comfortable kind of putting it in Tyler's hands and all that, letting him kind of run it, and then the amount of fourth downs they had. So there was some reasons that why, but their offensive line will be much better next year. I think Zach Kittley is going to bring in his starting center from Western Kentucky and Rusty Stotts. And the Western Kentucky guard that they brought in last year that would have been a starter all year, he gets hurt in July, has to have a minor surgery for his back, and he misses the whole year. And so he would have been a starter. So that's their offensive line will look worlds different. At least the thought is. And so that part should be fixed, and they'll be faster on offense. They're trying to address some of that with recruiting and portal and all those things. But I think it probably made Zach a lot better coordinator this year in having to maneuver his way around all of these landmines and still finding success in one of the toughest leagues in the country. I think they were able to do that because they were fairly balanced. As I've told you, they didn't have a lot of speed. They dealt with a lot of injuries, and yet they just kept figuring out ways to win because all you need to know about Texas Tech football is they beat Iowa State scoring 14 points one week, and then they beat Oklahoma, I think, the next week scoring 55 points. And that sums up what Texas Tech football was this year. Whatever we need to do, we can adapt and we will thrive, and we're going to play hard doing it. And I think that really kind of sums up their team and their season because there's not hardly, other than Tyree Wilson, there's not a ton of NFL guys running around here right now.
So what is the conversation now around Behren Morton, right? I mean, he's what, 2 years now with the program, and
yeah, he's got it all in front of him, Josh.
Right? I mean, does he want to wait his turn one more year if Tyler Shough comes back? And I know Shuck's been injured, so it's like you're probably going to play some.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. But let's be honest, you're going to need both of them. Behren grew up a Red Raider fan. Behren is a coach's kid. I can't sit here and tell you without a shadow of a doubt that Behren is for sure going to come back and be patient, all that stuff. I just know this. Everybody around here will look him straight in the eye, and he knows this. Hey, if Tyler comes back, he may in fact be the starter. You'll more than likely play. But as soon as he leaves, the baton is yours. There's no doubt in anybody's mind the baton is yours. And so, and you can have it for as long as you want to stay here because he's got 3 years left to play. Right. So and I think if you saw the Texas Bowl, if they're both here, they're both going to be used. I didn't really believe a lot of this talk about these multi-QB packages. Zach is extremely creative. Some of it worked against Ole Miss, some of it didn't, but that will continue. And I think if they're both here, but yeah, you and I both know. I mean, look who played in the Big 12 championship game this year in TCU and Kansas State. Those are essentially 2 backup quarterbacks. Yeah. This is what it takes in this league. You can't get through the league with just one guy.
We saw with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Correct. I mean, just awful because they had no quarterback depth.
Yeah,
and the teams that had the depth, guess what? I mean, like you said, 2 guys who were not QB1 to start the year end up being the guys there at the end of the season.
And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Tyler is indeed back. If you work that out through NIL stuff to ensure that you keep your both guys. I mean, because Texas Tech has done a really good job. They're not crazy with some of the dollar figures. They're
organized, which is more than you can say for most schools at this point.
And they are extremely organized, and they were way out on the front end of being organized with it, and then trying to be fair. The culture meant a lot to Joey and all that stuff. So I think that could potentially factor in, but we'll see what that looks like in the coming days, weeks, months, or whatever is decisions have to be made and everything like that. So because if you get those 2 guys back, I mean, I would venture a guess that is easily the best quarterback room in the Big 12.
Yeah.
I mean, because Behren he's a dude. I mean, he has got.
You can tell when you watch him, man. He's got it just. Yep. And that's the conversation though, is like how much of an opportunity do you need? And then I think that comes the one question I have, and this is kind of something I'm thinking about across the league here, is like how much starting experience does a guy need? Because Spencer Sanders last year kind of was a playmaker. This year he was the team, and they were thriving when he was the team, right? A guy like a Will Howard was really bad, like really, really bad. And our friend Gabe Eicher was like, I think this guy should probably play tight end. And comes out and he wasn't wrong because Will Howard didn't look good. And then guess what? Will Howard says the game slowed down for me. I mean,
and I won and he won a Big 12 championship.
Right. And it's like, it's just different. It's like, oh my God. And so that's when I start wondering, it's like, all right, is it time to get starting experience? So it's a very interesting conversation to have, but acquiring depth, acquiring talent, like that's how you win. That's, it's not about just getting a layer of 5 stars, right? It's not how this works. It's about getting a lot of guys who can play at every single position, accumulating talent. That's why the top teams win a lot. And so, as fun as one recruiting class is, like that's the next thing is stacking and stacking and stacking. And I know Tech fans are, let's just get to this now. The hype for next year. I'm having a lot of, I'm doing a season review show, Chris, for every single Big 12 team and every single incoming Big 12 team. Haven't really had a whole lot of positive ones yet. This team is going to have a lot of juice going into next season. And you think about how the league has worked out. Last 3 seasons, 6 different teams have played for a Big 12 championship. Texas Tech has not been one of them. And that is the thing is, do they have what it takes? And we have a whole off season to go. We have a spring season. We have the portal and whatnot. But I cannot fault Tech fans for saying, why not us next year? Why can't it be us?
Yeah.
I think there's some stuff that needs to be fixed, but like, hey, go ahead and dream because y'all are going to feel a lot better than most of the fan bases in this league going into the next year.
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't, again, we don't ultimately know what everybody's going to have from a team and a coaching staff standpoint and your roster and all that stuff. But based on what we know right now is all we can go off of. I think Texas Tech fans have every right to feel like that they're going to be in the mix there. And Joey and because they're buying into the head coach and the players buy into the head coach and the head coach says, we're just getting started. You've seen nothing yet. Like we are here to win a championship, plural. And almost like he speaks it into existence kind of thing because, you never beat Texas and Oklahoma around here in the same year ever before. That happened. Winning 8 games in your first year when you were picked, 9th in the league? I mean, there was so much naysaying. And then I just look at it from the standpoint of there wasn't a lot of natural talent that the next level wants. There's not a lot of people on your team that would have started elsewhere, and yet you won 8 games, and you did it with 3 different starting quarterbacks that had semi-different styles, and you adapted, all those things. And so I just and again, they had some guys that could have gone the NFL that, like Tony Bradford and Jalen Hutchings and Rashad Williams and Malik Dunlap, the 2 starting corners and the 2 defensive tackles. They could have lost all 4 of those guys, but all 4 of those guys said, nope, I want another year under this head coach. And when you start seeing those announcements start to snowball a little bit, you're like, okay, this has a chance to be really, really fun because you don't lose anything on offense hardly, and you're going to add to it. They know they need to get better up front. They know they needed to get faster. They're trying to address it. And so, I'm guessing TCU's roster is going to look vastly different next year because if we
know nothing about that roster at this point in time. I mean, we know who's leaving, obviously, but
correct.
None of those guys have really declared anything yet because of the playoff.
But based on the year that they've had, and Max Duggan's going to leave, and there's there's some rumors about some of their coaches maybe taking other jobs and things like that. So who knows what? But other than that, you have to like your situation as much as anybody else's. I'm not saying it's the best. And there's some incomplete there on your situation along with everybody else's. But all we need to say is this. There will be expectations on this Texas Tech program next year. Joey invites it. He's looking forward to that because I think they recruited a top 25 class basically with no results on paper yet. They hadn't broken ground on a new $200 million facility. He's basically just preaching beliefs and what we this is what we want to do. Now, everybody, here's what we can see. Here's the crane that's going to build this new facility. Here's our tangible success on the field. And here's what my players will tell you about me and my staff. And so you've got all that. So, the arrow clearly pointing up. I don't know if it's Big 12 championship contender next year or not, but I guarantee you that they're going to be in the mix there sooner than later for sure.
Yeah, I mean, besides Kansas State and I think Texas and TCU, we have to wait and see. But I'd say K-State and Texas are the schools I feel really good about going next year. And Texas Tech's the next one, right? I mean, they finished top half of the league was just not on my radar for them. I thought they'd be and I loved how they were the benchmark for being good. I love the fact that they were they got that Baylor game was such a disaster, for them.
And that's the only game, Josh. They got only one that they like didn't play well or didn't show up, and it was because they turned it over 5 times. So it doesn't matter who you play, where you play, and when you turn it over 5 times, it's not going to go well. But
I love the way they came back the next week against TCU too. Like TCU, there was inevitability with TCU this year, and then they're 4-5. And guess what? I mean, now we're talking a month and a half later, and they're 8-5. And that's coaching. Like that is coaching. 4-5 late in the season? What's there left to play for? A whole lot apparently. And he did a great job with all of that. Chris, I know you're tired. I'll get you out of here. It's also on to the hardwood for you on Saturday. I'm forgetting who's Tech out this week.
They are in Fort Worth. There won't be anybody at that game wearing purple because they're all going to be in Phoenix. They play the Horned Frogs at 11 a.m. Saturday.
Oh my God.
And the football team will be playing at 3 p.m. So the basketball game will be – so Tech kind of catches a break there because it won't be some ruckus
anytime you want to visit Fort, this is the time to visit Fort Worth.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But you're off the plane, and then 2 days later, you're onto the hardwood, and it's crazy because I feel like now the football schedule, and you can speak to this too. And I know you do basketball, so it's there for you. But football is basically ending this week, and we're right into conference basketball because of signing day, because of the portal, all of this stuff. Like the football calendar kind of organically, this is not like an NFL, we want to put free agency and schedule release here. It's just organically rolled. And then the Big 12 is going to get our schedule release in February. So football is not going to leave us alone for the next couple of months. And then we're into basketball at the same time too.
I will tell you, for your listeners here, you will get that schedule in mid-January.
Mid-January.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You heard it here.
You heard it first.
That's what I'm prepared to tell you.
All right, Chris.
Yeah, you will not have to wait till February to get it.
Thank God. That's good for content schedule. All right, Chris, where can people find you and your work and all of its variety?
Yeah, well, as you can see on Twitter and everything like that, yeah, I'm on RedRaidersports.com. Me and Casey Cowan do at Locked On Texas Tech. You can find us on Twitter there at Locked On Tech, or search for us on YouTube. We started this thing at the late August and have been riding the wave ever since. We've got over 2,000, I think, subscribers on YouTube very quickly. The reception has been awesome. I thoroughly enjoy working with Cowan on a daily basis. He's very good at what he does. And so, and I appreciate, Josh, you having me on this deal so we could talk some Red Raiders and just Big 12 in general. But that's where you can find us and me. And Josh, you do a really good job on Sirius XM. Those guys, I enjoy hopping on those shows when I can. But I hope everybody out there has a happy New Year, man.
Chris, I got a lot of cactuses in the replies and in the comments, so it's always good to talk to you. And actually, I'll tell you one more thing. Did a video yesterday about Big 12, or I did a video today about TCU and Michigan, and somebody said, "When is that Texas Tech recap video coming?" So glad we can help the fans out. Chris, appreciate your time as always, man.
You got it, brother. Yes, sir.